Good evening, everybody. Hell's Unicorn here once again, and this video is going to be a response to a video that I just watched that was put on by Spawktalk. I'm surprised that he actually put this video up, given his history here as a more reasoned thinker on YouTube, but I guess it is possible for the enlightened to fall into darkness. The sum of the contents of his video is beyond pathetic. And really, I shouldn't be starting by summing up his arguments. I should be breaking them down bit by bit, piece by piece. But, why should I do that when Fringeelements already does this? So instead, I'm going to provide a link in the description to Spawktalk's video and to Fringeelements' video, and I'm going to let you look at the technical aspects of the arguments from the horse's mouth in both cases. I instead am going to talk about a more fundamental part of the economic equation that Spawktalk is utterly ignorant of. And indeed, this is something that usually doesn't get brought up in most discussions about economics, and that is the human equation. Now, it is something that is, to a certain extent, discussed in von Mises's works. He talks specifically about the uniqueness and the unpredictability of human acts. But I want to just focus on the most fundamental premise of production: the existence of the human being, the individual. We're starting with one human being, the most basic unit here. And by doing this, we are doing something that no Keynesian that I've ever had a debate with has ever done before, and that is break economics down to the most basic micro level and work your way up, following the basic premise that there is no massive, insurmountable gap between microeconomics and macroeconomics. A gap that none of them have ever been able to explain to me rationally. A person is on a desert island. His primary motivation is survival. And so, in order to accomplish this, he needs to engage in productive activity. First, to procure the necessities, food, clothing, shelter, and so on and so forth, in order to gain a basic and necessary security for his own life. This is done entirely of his own initiative. In time, when he is able to accomplish all of this, let's say that he encounters a woman and the two of them decide to start a family together. This is the most basic unit of what we know as society, the family unit. This is something that is often taken for granted both by secularistic statists who put Caesar where God usually is for the theist, and nihilistic anarchists also. This is the fundamental from which society comes from. And this comes about through a very specific process of economic activity, where a person must engage in productive behavior in order to survive. He can't be bothered wasting his time fashioning spears so he can go out and hunt the lion and get himself killed. So the man, both as an individual and as a family unit, is possessed of some basic common sense. Somewhere between this most basic unit of human society and where we are now today, this concept is lost, and we come up with this ridiculous notion that war and destruction encourages life. That's basically what the premises of Spawktalk's argument is. Death brings about life. It's akin to doublespeak, really. I mean, I literally felt like I was paging through an idiot's guide to 1984 when I was listening to Spawktalk blurt out this stuff. I have no idea how a person can intellectually de-evolve this much. But I guess it is possible because, by the same token, at the most basic fundamental level of survival, the individual and the family will do that which is rational in their own self-interest because it is of utter necessity. But when necessity gives way for privilege, all of a sudden we can reintroduce self-destructive behavior in order to attain to prosperity. What would happen if, say, we progress gradually from the single family unit up to a small village? What happens when everybody employs Spawktalk's idea that in order to encourage economic growth, we need to engage in a little bit of chaos and bloodshed and piracy? The village would depopulate itself, and it would either have to start from scratch or it might completely annihilate itself, and in which case nothing will happen afterwards. I'm paraphrasing here, but this is something from Sun Tzu in The Art of War. But a kingdom once destroyed can never be rebuilt, and the dead can never rise and live again. That's a paraphrase. I don't think that's an exact quote. Sun Tzu, who wrote an entire theory about how war should be properly fought, understood at the most fundamental level what the ultimate cost of war is. And I find it utterly detestable that people can speak about war, violence, destruction in such cavalier terms and call it an economic theory. It's disgusting. And I'm just going to sum this all up by saying the following. FDR did not get us out of the Depression. He kept us in it. He can only be credited with getting us out of the Depression in the fact that he died. His dying and being replaced with somebody who was maybe a little bit better is what got us out of the Depression. But even then, no. The government had very little to do with it. The government did, by doing less, they did more. And indeed, there's this fundamental line between minarchists and anarchists regarding whether or not basic fundamental government is preferred or if the private sector can work out the governing responsibilities themselves or society itself. My current understanding of politics, I think, is a form of minarchism that leans towards some of the premises of anti-statism as Fringeelements understands it. I don't believe that anybody in the government is above the law. And I don't believe that anybody in society, regardless of how well-to-do they are, is above the law. Indeed, no man is above the law. So the law, by consequence, is objective. It is separate from man. Now, the problem with all of this is, as many of you have guessed, if law is wholly objective, then how can it be created by man? And the answer is, it's not. And you can pretty well guess at the theological implications of that statement, so I need not go any further. But in spite of this one disagreement that I have with Fringeelements, there's one thing that him and I have in common, and that is that we detest people who think the way that Spawktalk apparently does now. I am unsubscribing from Spawktalk's channel, and I don't want anything else to do with him, because, quite frankly, I don't have time for this. So, feel free to leave me your comments. Let me know if you think I'm being a little bit too hard on Spawktalk. I don't think I am. When a person falls this far, this fast, it's pretty well a done deal. With prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.